Greetings and salutations to all for another season of the Gilded Age, the show that ever stops highlighting the reality that the 1% have always been 1%. Except in 1883, it took an hour to lace up the boots that stood on the necks of the underprivileged. This season, by which I obviously mean the opera season. What other season is there? Once again, Bertha Russell is at the bottom of the waiting line for a box at the Academy of Music, where the best opera singers come to see world-class performances. Giving directions is one thing that true New Yorkers enjoy doing. If there is one other thing that New Yorkers enjoy doing, it is thinking back to a time when a certain storefront was something else entirely. Thus, here are two for. Situated near Union Square at the intersection of 14th Street and Irving Place, the actual Academy of Music was a lavish opera house. In 1926, it was demolished to make room for the Con Ed structure, the one with the large clock tower. If Ward McAllister's 400 had known that one of their major class disputes would center on a piece of land that currently sits across from Trader Joe's, they would be rolling over in their graves. At the start of the episode, Eastern New Yorkers from all social classes are seen visiting church and acting responsibly by not rekindling their savage rivalries in a place of religion. Even still, Mrs. Astor and Agnes find it difficult to accept that the Russells are only a pew away. Bertha is angry that she can't acquire a box at the esteemed Academy of Music, even though all of the congregants are welcome in the Lord's home. Bertha simply lacks the history of old money, honey, and the Academy of Music is maybe the purest embodiment of that. Even though Bertha has been kissing Mrs. Astor for a long time and their kids, Gladys and Carrie, are good friends, Mrs. Astor still maintains her distance from her. In an attempt to win Mrs. Astor over, Bertha extends an invitation to tea. Although Mrs. Astor commends Bertha for her efforts to fit in, there are limits to what she can do at the opera. Mrs. Astor becomes enraged when Bertha advises that she simply purchase a box at the recently constructed Metropolitan Opera House, informing her that she would be throwing away any goodwill she has accrued with the old guard. Eventually, in 1966, the Metropolitan Opera Building, which was situated at 1411 Broadway at 39th Street, was demolished. Today, the site is an office tower that houses a co-working space. Simply said, I'm relieved that it's not a Chase Bank. Bertha informs Mrs. Astor that she is organizing an opera enthusiast dinner so that everyone can continue their discussion. However, Bertha also intends to use the event as a means of recruiting rich friends who share her taste in music and who she feels are equally excluded. George Russell tells his wife, quite comically, "You don't even like opera." Bertha is essentially creating an organization known as the Nouveau Riche, bringing together those who have been denied admission to the Academy and convincing them to purchase boxes at the recently built Metropolitan Opera House. It is ironic that Bertha is now pushing for unionization of the young and wealthy, given that her husband George, the train system robber baron, is already engaged in conflict with his unionized employees. Alternatively, he describes his situation as including some troublesome business in Pittsburgh. George, please give them some slack. All they want is to avoid dying at work. Unfortunately, he is unable to do so, and upon meeting fellow robber baron Jay Gould, despite their rivalry within the same sector, they discover a shared goal in opposing the right of their employees to health care and an 8-hour workday. Instead of turning against them, they expect that the employees would begin fighting among themselves and turn against one another. Haha, you old so-and-so capitalism. Wonderful to see you. Rather than attending the Easter service in their neighborhood of Brooklyn, Peggy Scott and her parents, Dorothy and Arthur, are traveling to Philadelphia, where their Sunday service is being held in conjunction with Thomas's funeral. Thomas was Peggy's son, whom her father had secretly sent away and informed her had died in childbirth. Even though Peggy expressed a wish to see Thomas and we were made aware of that scenario, at the conclusion of the previous season, the youngster and his adopted mother passed away from scarlet fever during that interim. Peggy's loss and her feelings for her father serve as an emotional buffer for the series because the other characters are so consumed with frivolity and class conflict. She may be the only character on the show experiencing genuine grief, guilt, or trauma, while the others fuss over the opera in their mansions. Because of the circumstances, Peggy and her mother blame Arthur for Thomas's death. Despite the fact that the man believed he was moving the boy away in the best interests of Peggy, they believe the boy would not have become ill if he had stayed with Peggy. They'd all have the same regret, but Peggy needs some time apart from her family because of it. Peggy tells her parents, "We have been stuck in this trio of regret for too long," and she asks Marian if she can take a job as Agnes's secretary back at the Van Ryn residence. a position she quit from after racist attempts to have her dismissed by Armstrong, the Van Ryn housekeeper. This season, Marian Brooke is the one with secrets. Last season, it was Peggy, rather than everyone else. Marian is hesitant to meet with Agnes's nephew Dashiell Montgomery and his 14-year-old daughter Frances when Aunt Agnes learns that they are in New York, because their schedule clashes with something she has scheduled for Thursdays. Agnes, who Marian knows will disapprove, finds out that she has been teaching in secret at a girls' school. But things get trickier when Marian realizes that Frances is one of her students. Marian snaps back, calling Aunt Agnes harsh and spiteful. Agnes rips Marian a new one for her to seat. That goes about as badly as you can expect, and Aunt Ada almost faints from the clamor. The lone successor to the Van Ryn dynasty, and Agnes's son is Oscar Van Ryn. Oscar devised a scheme to court Gladys Russell the previous season. He saw in her the chance to marry into affluence, to capitalize on her innocence to grow a beard on her, and to continue his relationship with his boyfriend, John Adams. However, Gladys is icing Oscar these days. John Adams appears to have gone on, and Oscar wants nothing more from life than to drink his troubles away. Sadly, Oscar made a pass on the wrong guy at the bar on Easter Sunday. This was before Prohibition, when establishments were forbidden to open on Sundays, and as a result, he got beat severely. Even though he tells his family that he was mugged, he tells John Adams the truth when he comes over to comfort him. Oscar has realized that the Van Ryn name dies with him if he stays true to himself and spends the rest of his life as a bachelor in a covert relationship with Adams. His family cannot handle that, which is why he is making every attempt to get closer to Gladys, even though it would mean he would probably secretly cheat on her with Adams. At least with her he could have an heir. Oscar requests that Aurora Fane host a tea party in honor of their cousin Dashiell Montgomery, who has returned to New York, and extend an invitation to Gladys. Oscar uses the celebration as an occasion to let Gladys know that he could also guarantee her independence and that she wouldn't be subject to him. Even though he views the proposal as more of an understanding than a romantic gesture, he makes it without giving her a ring. Bertha Russell's dinner in favor of the new opera house serves as the episode's climax. In essence, it was a dinner in support of the new Met, and perhaps it was also to show Mrs. Astor, very pointedly, that Bertha means business when it comes to taking a seat at the head of high society's table, even though she had billed the evening as a night for all opera lovers, to entice Mrs. Astor to coming. Or, if you like, in the opera box. A who's who of people Mrs. Astor and the Academy have repeatedly messed with is present as the guests arrive. Have you searched the city for the disillusioned wealthy? Bertha asks Mrs. Astor, what a sentence. When Mamie Fish asks Bertha why she has gathered everyone, she responds, I simply want Mrs. Astor to understand the competition the Academy will face. Bertha then brings out Christina Nilsson, the biggest opera diva of the day, to serenade her guests. Everyone is in a state of shock, but Miss Astor is particularly so. Christina Nilsson is not only incredibly talented, but she only performs at the Academy when she is in New York. It's unexpected. No, it's offensive. That's Bertha, though, for you. As the church rector, Robert C. Leonard has joined the cast, and you have to enjoy it when the rector is a gossip. He tells Agnes, Ada, and Marian that he is officiating a wedding, and they all get upset when they learn that Sissy Bingham and Marian's ex Tom Ranks are being married.